Corlys Velaryon might be the single most important person in the entire Dance of the Dragons, and he's not even a king. Here's why. Whoever Corlys backs basically gets a head start on winning the war. He has the biggest fleet in the world. He has more money than almost anyone in Westeros. And he controls Driftmark, the island sitting right at the mouth of Blackwater Bay, which means his ships sit between the open sea and King's Landing. If you want to supply the capital, blockade it, or move armies by water, you go through him. So think about what that means. If Corlys backs Aegon and the Greens get the strongest navy and the deepest pockets in the realm. The Blacks might lose before they even get going. But if Corlys backs Rhaenyra, the Blacks can choke King's Landing by sea and fund a long war. His choice doesn't just help one side, it might decide who wins. So why does a man with this much power pick Rhaenyra over Aegon? Because once you look past the he's just loyal to family answer, Corlys turns out to be the smartest player in the whole war. Let's be clear about who Corlys actually is, because people sleep on him. He's the Sea Snake, the best sailor Westeros ever produced. He made 9 huge voyages across the world and came back loaded with gold, spices, silk, and trade routes nobody else had. That turned House Velaryon into a money machine. At his peak, the Velaryons were richer than the Lannisters and the Hightowers. Some years richer than the crown itself. And it wasn't just money. His fleet was the biggest in the world. Hundreds of warships. He ruled Driftmark, which gave him control of the seas around the capital. So this isn't some minor lord lending a few boats. This is the guy who can tip the whole war. That's exactly why he just loved his daughter-in-law doesn't really explain his choice. The simple answer everyone gives on paper, the reason looks obvious. His son Laenor was married to Rhaenyra. That tied House Velaryon straight to the heir of the Iron Throne. If Rhaenyra wins, a Velaryon sits next to her, and Velaryon grandkids are next in line to rule the realm. It went further too. Their families were locked together with betrothals. Rhaenyra's son Jacaerys was promised to Baela. Her son Lucerys was promised to Rhaena. And those 2 girls weren't random. They were Corlys' own granddaughters, the daughters of his late daughter Laena and Prince Daemon Targaryen. So when people say Corlys was already allied with Rhaenyra, they're right. His name, his blood, and his future were all tied to the black side before the war even started. But that's just the surface. The real reason is colder and a lot smarter. Here's the thing Corlys got that almost nobody else did. He wasn't fighting for one throne. He was setting up his family so they couldn't lose. Forget about pure blood for a second, because Corlys did. Everyone in King's Landing whispered that Rhaenyra's 3 oldest sons weren't really Laenor's. Jacaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey all had brown hair and plain faces, while real Valyrian blood means silver hair and purple eyes. People said the actual father was Sir Harwin Strong. They even called the boys the Strong Boys behind their backs. It was an open secret at court. Corlys knew. He wasn't dumb. So why didn't he care? Because he was thinking way ahead. Those boys were being raised as Velaryons. They carried his name, his money, and his fleet behind them. To Corlys, what mattered wasn't whose blood was in them, it was which house they belonged to, and they belonged to his. Then here's the smart part. Those boys were promised to Baela and Rhaena, Corlys' actual granddaughters, with real Velaryon and Targaryen blood. So even if Jace and Luke weren't his blood, their kids would be. Marry the heirs to his granddaughters, and the next generation carries true Velaryon blood again. So one generation gets him the name on the throne. The next generation gets the blood back. He loses nothing and gains everything. 2 lines, the throne and the sea. This is where the plan gets really clever. Corlys quietly locked down 2 power centers at the same time. First, the Iron Throne. Jacaerys was Rhaenyra's oldest son and her heir. When she takes the throne, Jace becomes the future king, a boy raised as a Velaryon, married to Corlys' granddaughter. Second, Driftmark itself. Corlys named Lucerys his heir to the Velaryon seat. Luke was promised to Rhaena, his other granddaughter. So the fleet, the island, and the trade empire all stay inside the family too. The throne on one side, the sea power on the other. And Velaryon blood flowing into both within a single generation. Most great houses would do anything just to get 1 foot near the Iron Throne. Corlys was setting up to own a piece of the throne and keep the most powerful navy in the world, all under one family. Nobody else was playing the game at that level. Why he never flipped to the Greens people love the what if here. What if the Sea Snake had switched sides? With his fleet and gold, couldn't he have just handed Aegon an easy win? Sure, and then watched his whole future fall apart. If Corlys backs the Greens, everything he built is gone. His grandkids lose their spot in line for the throne. The betrothals mean nothing. Laenor and Rhaenyra's marriage becomes a dead end instead of a launchpad. Driftmark's careful succession plan turns into a mess, and his power at court disappears, because the Greens don't need him there. He had already put everything into the black side. Decades of planning, 2 marriages, multiple betrothals, a grandson lined up to be king. Throw all of that away to join a side that gives you a smaller seat at someone else's table. Switching wasn't strong. Switching would have ended the Velaryons, and this is the part that really settles it. The Greens couldn't have bought Corlys even if they tried, because they had nothing he actually wanted. The Green side was already built around House Hightower. Alicent was a Hightower. Otto Hightower was the hand running everything. The Hightowers controlled Oldtown, one of the richest and oldest power bases in Westeros. If Corlys joined them, he'd be standing behind the Hightowers, not above them. And here's the kicker. Corlys and the Hightowers were rivals. The Velaryons had spent years passing Oldtown in wealth and naval strength. So why would the most powerful Sea Lord in the world go kneel inside a faction run by the family he'd been outgrowing? The Greens offered him a ceiling. The Blacks offered him a future. One side basically said, fall in line. The other side said, your blood will rule. For a guy like Corlys, that's not even a real choice. There's one more piece that makes the Black side so dangerous, and it's the man who married into Corlys' family, Daemon Targaryen. Look at what this group actually put together. Daemon brought the muscle, battle experience, a scary reputation, and dragons. Rhaenyra brought legitimacy as the named heir of King Viserys, the daughter he picked in front of the whole realm. And Corlys brought the navy, the fleet that controlled the seas around the capital and the trade money to pay for armies. Money, legitimacy, dragons, ships. Put all four on one side and you've basically got the strongest possible team in the war. Was it risky? Yeah, Daemon was unpredictable, the bastard rumors were a weakness, and Aegon had already been crowned. But for Corlys, this wasn't just the safest road to power, it was the only road that went all the way to the top. Playing it safe doesn't put your blood on the Iron Throne. This did. Now here's the part that should bug you, because it's a real contradiction. Corlys is obsessed with legacy. He cares about his name, his blood, and his family lasting for 1,000 years. This is a guy who built a fancy castle called High Tide just to show off his house's glory, and yet he spent the war defending heirs that half of Westeros called bastards. He stood behind boys with the wrong hair, boys the whole realm gossiped about, and he never flinched. So how does a legacy-obsessed man back fake heirs? Because Corlys figured out something most lords never did. A safe, powerful house beats a pure one. Blood doesn't matter if your family loses the war and ends up dead or disgraced. He'd rather have grandkids on the throne with a scandal attached than a perfect bloodline with no power at all. Stability and legacy first, pure blood second. And remember, through Baela and Rhaenyra, the real blood comes back in the next generation anyway. So in his eyes, the scandal was temporary. The dynasty was the point. Strip away the strategy for a second, because there's a personal reason underneath all of it. Corlys was married to Rhaenys Targaryen, the one they call the Queen Who Never Was. She had a real claim to the throne and got passed over, just for being a woman, at the Great Council where the lords picked Viserys instead. That snub never really healed. Corlys and Rhaenys spent their lives watching a crown that could have been theirs sit on someone else's head. So when Rhaenyra became the heir, this was personal. It was the family's second shot at the throne that slipped away the first time. Laenor's marriage, the grandkids, the betrothals, all of it was Corlys reaching for the thing his own wife was denied. He wasn't just chasing power for the fun of it. He wanted House Velaryon remembered as the blood behind the Iron Throne. The family that didn't just serve kings, it made them. So no, Corlys didn't back Rhaenyra just out of loyalty. Loyalty was the nice story he could say out loud. The real reason was sharper. He backed her because of strategy. The Black side gave him the strongest possible team in the war. Gold, dragons, legitimacy, and the biggest fleet in the world, all in one place. He backed her because of legacy. His blood was set to reach both the Iron Throne through Rhaenyra's line and Driftmark through his granddaughters. 2 power centers in one move, and he backed her because of plain reality. The Greens only offered him a smaller chair behind his rivals. The Blacks offered him a dynasty that could rule Westeros for generations. Corlys Velaryon didn't pick a side in a war. He picked the only future where House Velaryon survives at the top of Westeros.